Oh, this meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're good. Look at that. This meeting is being recorded, which means it's another edition of the Drive with Q. I don't know. For some reason, sometimes we got to work out the kinks on certain things. Rich Quinones here, our NFL insider, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, SR 1029 FM. The game, Lloyd Vance. It's easier when it's a live version, but sometimes we gotta B-roll and then stick it in there. 11 weeks of the NFL season in the books, my friend. And obviously, the big news coming down over the last 24, 48 hours, the Jets, no surprise, firing their GM, Joe Douglas. I was not shocked. Now you're having and hearing all these reports coming out that Woody Johnson was thinking about going to the brass and saying you got to bench Aaron Rodgers after the Denver loss. You got Aaron Rodgers, showing that he's a lack of a leader, getting up there in age, broken down, obviously playing hurt. You've got just a debacle of things going on. And then you got the other team in New York that decides we're finally going to bench Daniel Jones, Drew Lock taken by surprise. So let's just say not a good time to be an NFL fan if you're a fan of one of those New York teams. Got to start with the Jets and Joe Douglas.
Yeah, it's crazy, Q. I guess you want to start talking baseball hot stove and moving on from these two teams. But you know, I I hate to say it, but you should almost pat yourself on the back because you called this right away with this Jets team. You said it's going to be a debacle. This is all the way back in August. You and I were talking about this, and some guys I had talked to up there said, Lloyd, a lot of misfitting pieces with this team going into the season. I kind of was like, oh, they'll overcome it. They brought in some good talent. It was aging. They had a pretty good draft, and the defense was in place. But it just has not worked, Q. And this is the latest person on the checklist for Woody Johnson. Douglas had done a pretty good job assembling some pieces there, but the record of the team just was not good enough. They get rid of Salah. They pulled the play calling duties from Hackett, and then this is the latest shoe to drop. So Douglas will move on. He'll get another job around National Football League, pretty well respected. But it all boils down to Aaron Rodgers, as you said. He's been playing junior GM, and it just has not worked out. Woody Johnson, the owner, has had enough, and I firmly believe next season Rodgers won't be there. All his cronies won't be there. There's 30 players that are 1 year deals, and it's just going to be a whole new situation for the New York Jets.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, it boils down to just mismanaging this roster. It was an overrated defense. They've got some talent, but I think, you can turn around and get rid of a Hall, get rid of a Wilson, get rid of a Sauce Gardner. You can make these moves. I think at this point, there's no way you even want Aaron Rodgers back. You fire the GM, that means a new GM is going to come in and hire who? A new head coach, which means they're going to come in and hire their own what? Coordinators, which means maybe another offensive scheme that Aaron Rodgers has to learn. He's not going to want to do that. I think this move for Aaron Rodgers is one of the single worst moves in NFL history, and without a doubt, the worst move of this Jet franchise, maybe in the whole New York sports history, because they put all their eggs in one basket. They sold their soul, and after four offensive snaps last year, he breaks down. This year, struggled, hurt, inconsistencies. He wants to bring in his players. He wants his own coordinator. Okay, here's your Hackett. Now you go and get Lazard. Now you got Adams. It hasn't worked out. I even said this on BYP last week. I love the Colts in that spot last week, bringing back Anthony Richardson, coming off that benching. But it's been an utter disgrace and debacle. You mentioned Joe Douglas is going to land on his feet. We can't even really speculate about the next head coaching candidates or GM possible candidates. But where do you think the franchise is right now with Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, Q, they're pretty much done with him, as you said. Woody Johnson looking to move on from him. Season can't end soon enough for this team, and maybe Woody Johnson goes back and does something with the government again with Trump being elected, and he leaves it in Chris Johnson's hands, and they move on from there. But Aaron Rodgers it, it just didn't work, and they thought, okay, we're getting Joe Montana going to Kansas City Chiefs, Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, this did not work
Peyton Manning. Yep.
because he was done. He was done by all counts, and he's going to be 41 in a couple of weeks. He's not moving around well in the pocket. He probably should have just said, all right, I got hurt 4 snaps in last season, called it a career,
That's
but he,
it.
he decided to come back. He's an egomaniac. Everything has to be his way. And the Jets acquiesced to everything, put all the eggs in his basket, and it just has not worked. This is their bye week. So obviously they're going to look insular and look at possible changes, and there's not much else they can change. And there is some talent here. You feel bad for Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, one of the most dynamic players in the NFL, young receiver there. Devontae Adams, they bring him in. The team is 2-4 at the time. They have not gotten any better. They're going to be picking in the top 5, and we'll just see how they go from there. But it's going to be a true house cleaning.
Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here, powered by Zen Auto Concepts and our good friends at Play It Again Sports on Coastal Sports Network, 1029 FM The Game. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. I'm Rich Quinones. Then you look at the other team in New York and the Giants benching Daniel Jones, which is not a shock, but now going to Tommy DeVito. Drew Lock basically went out on the record, hey, I pretty much, to paraphrase, thought I was brought in to be the backup. I don't want to hear Michael Lombardi's a goofball. I don't want to hear there's that $5 million spent you could have used on. Shut up. Just enough of the nonsense and that narrative. But I guess my question is, if DeVito was your third string quarterback and you already kind of know what you have in him and you brought in Locke just to be the backup, did Tommy DeVito do something that blew you away leading up to this point to jettison Drew Lock? I mean, I just think the whole thing reeks. I said this too. I think Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are going to be out at the end of the season. And again, you start having this head coach GM carousel. You go through the McAdoo's, the Shermers, the Judge, and now the Brian Dabolls. That's how you become the Jets. There's zero consistency, or Jacksonville, or Tampa many moons ago, or the Cleveland Browns, or Washington, which is now finally turned around. But if you're the Giants, you're playing out the string. You're hoping to get that #1 draft pick. I just don't understand why even have Locke as a backup. And the other thing is, if Daniel Jones is going to be benched, well, he's benched, and he's going to be inactive, then pull what the Raiders did with Carr. Like, just release him. Like, why do you need him to hang around for 7 more weeks?
Yeah, they're giving the old TO treat. They should just send him home. That's what the Eagles did with TO way back in the day, and said, you'll be on a roster, but you'll be inactive, and that's kind of what they're doing. And Q, I was talking to some guys around the league. There are some easy reachable contract incentives for Drew Lock. Like if he starts a certain games, and I don't think it's a ton of money, but they don't want to pay him that, and that's why they're putting him on his side too. Tommy DeVito, as you know, last year he did beat the Eagles. He did beat the Green Bay Packers on that magical night,
And he's not
Monday
going to
Night
hit his
Football.
incentives. He's
Well,
not going to hit those incentives.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's just total mismanagement. You talk about Joe Shane. He did a bad job this offseason. And it's funny, there's a lot of foreshadowing on that Hard Knocks offseason where you saw he just didn't have not a lot of control of his team. And I don't think Mara has a lot of confidence in him, quite
Do
frankly.
you,
So, yeah.
not to interrupt you, but that whole Hard Knocks, like, I feel as though they were being cute for the camera, and it kind of bit him in the ass, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to be able to sleep well. So, hey, man, at the end of the day, John Mara signs off on it, whether they're going to pay Saquon or not. Joe Shane just figures out the money and if it's applicable and if it's going to be a good fit moving forward. And you saw Brian Daboll's reaction when Joe Shane was like, we'll pretty much run it back with DJ. I mean, the camera, I can't imagine if they really walked around 24/7 with a camera, and you're catching everything that's coming out of their mouths. I mean, half of it, these guys would have been gone by now. That locker room would have been imploded. But what happens now is you've got starters that back DJ. They maybe back Drew Lock. You got the nice story in DeVito. You're telling me you're going to start this kid. Why? Because he's a Jersey kid. He's not going to provide a spark. That is so overblown. A spark, a little bit of juice. No, really? I mean, honestly, I think they might win a couple games with DeVito. If they would have stuck with Jones, I didn't see him winning a lot of games, and I can see DeVito coming in and screwing their draft status. But be that as it may, from top to bottom, it's been a debacle. It's been a disgrace. I don't know how Dable and Joe Shane survived this. Or are you of the sentiment you got to have patience with these GMs and head coaches? You can't get rid of them after 2-3 years.
No, I think they're going to move in another direction, Q. And these guys that had long enough to build this team, they just did a bad job with it in terms of, thinking Singletary could replace Saquon and giving Daniel Jones that contract. Obviously, that contract doesn't look as bad when Dak Prescott's making $60 million, but he just has never lived up to that contract after they got it. And they supported the wrong guy. So yeah, the players in the locker room are going to support Daniel Jones, but they're going to have to move on from that. Him and I do think Daboll and Joe Shane are in trouble, and they're probably this is another rip down situation. It's crazy because they're trying to play for a draft pick, kind of doing the old Sixers tank, by putting Tommy DeVito in there. But I think Tommy could win a couple games, especially
I'm
with that
afraid of that.
defense. Dexter Lawrence and some of those guys. Next thing you know, you're not picking in the top five. But the thing is, Q, the quarterbacks in this draft are okay. They're just not, it's not that elite class coming out this season.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think it was pretty much it was a foregone conclusion after they struggled in Germany against Carolina. All right, let's just highlight recap a couple of these marquee
Yeah.
games. Your Steelers, right? Russell Wilson. Are the Ravens a flawed team or are the Steelers legit?
A little of both, but I think a big thing is Mike Tomlin's got Baltimore's number. The last
He
nine
does.
games, Baltimore's 1-8 versus Steelers, and Lamar's now 1-4 versus the Steelers as well. So they played a good game, a physical game. Uh, you'd rather have some more touchdowns than all those field goals. Boswell did his job with six good kicks, including 350-yarders. And on the other side of it, Justin Tucker, you got to start wondering, is he going to be a problem for Baltimore? I think Baltimore will still bounce back, be in the playoffs, but good solid win for Pittsburgh. And now to 8-2, they're trying to drive towards the top of the playoff race.
Yeah, field goal kicking has been an adventure. Another game that comes down to a block field goal in Chicago and Green Bay. And by the way, I was counting my blessings because Mr. Automatic in Denver, when you're sitting there, I'm sorry, in Dallas, when you're sitting there at -4.5, first half money line for the Texans, and you're sitting there saying to yourself, okay, getting a little dicey or getting a little dicey, and then boom, what happens? He misses that kick, and you're good to go into the locker room at 20-13 as opposed to 20-16. I would have been screwed. But again, be that as it may, Green Bay got a really nice win. It shows the toughness. The Lions, man, Jared Goff, you got to stick him in the MVP race. Jared Goff throws 4 picks, comes back 5 picks. They ran it up against Jacksonville. They're trying to make a statement. But for my money, and I know you always break down the numbers, for my money, we saw this on Friday. We called this on Friday. I was all over Buffalo. I know you were a little, but Josh Allen now puts himself right there when it comes to best quarterback in the NFL. And I feel as though we have to have this conversation. I don't hear a lot of national talking heads really pontificating about this, but Patrick Mahomes has not played well this year.
Yeah, and I'll take those games in order kind of you laid them out there. First one, oldest rivalry in National Football League. Packers could, they win by 1 point. They blocked the potential game-winning field goal. Another situation, the Bears are 0-11 versus Matt LaFleur. So he's got their number. Obviously, Caleb Williams, they brought in a new coordinator, Brown, trying to do some things with him. We're able to put up some points and finally have a passing attack. But the Packers are a good team, but they're inconsistent. So that was a good solid win for them. The Lions, they show what you did to a bad team, man. They ran that score up. They scored on every single possession. The Jaguars are now 2-9. I think Doug Peterson is not going to survive this
No.
bye week unless Shad Khan's asleep at the wheel. He's got to make a change here. Lions definitely looking like the best team in the league. And then the marquee game, yeah, Buffalo and Kansas City. And what I really like this one, Josh Allen stepped forward in this game, Q. He really showed that he should be the leader in the clubhouse in terms of the MVP race. It was 4th and 2. They could have kicked that field goal. Sean McDermott said, we're not putting the ball Patrick Mahomes' hands. And the thing is, Mahomes, yeah, he's a little down this season, but he can still lead that game-winning drive. He did have 3 TDs, but he did have 2 interceptions. As you said, Q, he's very up and down this season. They've been winning games in spite of him. They do have Spags' defense that's one of the best in the NFL, but the Bills really showed that they're a true contender. Allen now 4-1 against KC in a regular season.
I think a lot of people are looking at Lamar Jackson, Goff, even maybe Jalen Hurts in there. We knew Josh Allen's numbers, Lamar Jackson reigning NFL MVP. He was pretty much the favorite according to BetMGM. That was until uh, Sunday, right? I mean, because now you think about it at this moment, right? So think about this. The last time a non-quarterback won the NFL MVP was 2012. You know who that was?
Adrian Peterson.
Adrian Peterson, 2,000 rushing yards. Before that, the Damian Thomas in 2006 when he had that monster year. So history usually suggests that the quarterback wins the position. Now, you could make a case if he continues, I know you know where I'm going with this, down that path, that number 26 behind that
He
offensive
he
line, which
won't
will,
even say the name.
I know exactly. Yeah. Say, well, let me give you the updated odds before we get into that. Um,
Yep.
so Allen right now is at plus 150. Okay. Um, and Lamar Jackson is at plus 200. Jared Goff, I would grab that at plus 650 right now because obviously the odds went up, they came down, they go up. I mean, that's pretty much how it is. He's at a 74% completion clip. The touchdowns are there. I mean, it's just unbelievable. He's putting up Drew Brees kind of like numbers with the accuracy. Holmes is number 4. And then you say, okay, who's number 5? That's Jalen Hurts. Now, these are all the quarterbacks I'm naming. So we'll get to Allen right now, and then I'll get to my Saquon. Do you believe at this moment Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the NFL, and is he deserving of the MVP based on that win against Kansas City?
Yeah, I think he right now is the leader in clubhouse, and he's playing at such an elite level, leading his team. Cut down on his turnovers, Q. You know, he does not have a lot of interceptions this season. And the key thing for him is he has that running game with Cook now. It's really helping him out. So puts on a Superman cape at times, but I definitely think Allen is the leader in terms of the MVP race now. Golf, you know, he's inconsistent, but he's put up some big numbers. And we know voters love teams that, you know, in first place and get that bye.
Yes, exactly. Okay, now Saquon. I mean, listen, I can pull up. I mean, you got to factor in they got two of the best wide receivers. You know, listen, Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I know he's an enigma. I'll try to find Saquon Barkley's updated numbers. I mean, a lot of people are saying right now, stick him in the MVP race. These are all
I got him here.
quarterbacks. Yeah, I mean,
190.
listen, how can you
Yeah,
not? He's on pace.
yeah.
Look, his rookie year, he had over, I think, close to 1,000 yards receiving as well. So I'm trying to find non-quarterback, 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 non-quarterback. I'll get it in a second, but just your thoughts on Saquon.
Yeah. And you know, we were talking about this on my show the other night, and he has jumped in the MVP race. And as you say, Q, it's typically a quarterback award, but you know, the way he's playing and carrying this Eagles team and is incredible. You know, 197 rushes. He's at 1137 already. He has 8 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry, 210 receiving, 2 TDs. And the key thing for me, Q, is he's been vultured a lot at the goal line, but Jalen Hurts, you know, with this tush push.
Push,
Imagine
push,
he probably have another five,
six,
six
seven
touchdowns
touchdowns.
if they didn't do that. So, you know, he's having a great season. He saved their bacon the other night once again against Washington. That game was in the balance, and then he had those 2 runs at the end that closed the door. So, you know, the Eagles are smart. They lean on him, but you know, Saquon definitely got to put him in offensive player of the year
But then
award.
if
Usually
that's the case, you got to
that's a
put Derrick Henry.
non-quarterback award.
You got to put Derrick Henry in there too. Derrick Henry's plus
Yeah.
150. Saquon plus 115 offensive player of the year. 3 weeks ago, Henry was pretty much set at the plus 125 favored. And at the time, I think Barkley was at plus 380. That's why you got to jump on him. And then, you know, you talk about um, offensive rookie of the year, rookie of the year. We were hemming and hawing about Jaden Daniels. Hey, wait a second. How about what's going on in Denver right now with Bo Nix?
Yeah, Q, and it's another thing we looked at on my show in terms of we looked at my early predictions and we said, oh, okay, who's doing what? And, you know, Bo Nix is playing so well. Uh, Team is what 6-5.
Playing real
His
well.
numbers, his numbers are better than all the other quarterbacks that were drafted ahead of him, Williams and May and all these guys. So yeah, definitely, I think he's in the mix. Obviously, Jaden Daniels jumped out to that early lead. But you have to think Bo Nix has got a shot, especially if Denver keeps playing well. But I think eventually Q that Daniels is still going to run with it, way with it because he's a marquee guy and all that stuff. So I think that Daniels will win it, but you definitely can't count out Bo Nix.
Well, they dropped two straight tough losses. Pittsburgh, Philly. He didn't really blow them away in those games. It's pretty evident he's hit a little bit of a wall right now. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it's bound to happen. They got Dallas coming up, and then of course the Cowboys have the Giants on Thanksgiving Day. Um, but yeah, there were some. I thought there were some really impressive wins over the weekends. I mean, the points are just these teams are just going up and down the field. I mean, the Lions with 52, the Dolphins with 34. How about the Saints with 35? I mean, Cleveland, that's another team that's going to be looking for a quarterback. Uh, Broncos, we just mentioned, put up 38. What's going on? Well, two things. You called it, I believe you said Cincinnati takes a step back, and they have. And I, I, I saw that coming. What I didn't see coming is what's going on in San Francisco. That's a horrible loss to Seattle. I'm sorry. You can't let Geno Smith go 60, 70 something odd yards and then make plays late. You can't. Now, we can chalk it up to the play calling, the head coach, the injuries. But I mentioned this last year. The 49ers broke the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm just wondering, was that the case now with San Fran? Did just getting back to another Super Bowl, having your heart ripped out again in overtime? Same team, by the way, Kansas City. Are they a broken team? Like, how do you explain? And now Purdy's banged up. How do you explain this drop off from San Francisco?
Q, they thought, okay, we'll get McCaffrey back and everything will get cleaned up, but there's just been a multitude of injuries on this team. Bosa, he came out of this game and then Seattle scored 20 straight points. He was dominant earlier, but he left with a hip injury and they don't have Brandon Ayuk and you could see Samuel's not the same player. Brock Purdy's doing his best, but in this NFC West, you could throw any of these teams in there and you're not sure who's going to come out front.
My
So
Arizona
you know,
Cardinals.
yeah, probably 5-5. That was a bad loss for them in terms of playoff seeding and where they are. I just think every season's different. Last year they had that magic ride, and this year they're having some problems in terms of defections, injuries, and it's going to be a long season for the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you just have a down season, right? And as we mentioned, it's too early. I don't want to say too early. It's late for a lot of teams, but we know there's going to be some substantial head coaching change, and we'll see how it plays out with some of these players wanting to come out too in college. I'm not enamored by these quarterbacks. I think Sanders is a lot of style, not substance. I think he's athletic. I think he's a little too small. He's tough. Don't get me wrong. Ward. Milroy, the kid from Alabama. If I'm a team with the number one draft pick, I might consider trading back and getting assets. I don't know, but these kids are going to go. It just has to be the right fit, and we're seeing it now. Look at the job that Harbaugh's doing with the Chargers right now. That's another team. Like I I I asked you this in August. I said, do you think Harbaugh's good for at least plus 2 to 3 wins just being Harbaugh as a head coach? And he's changed that franchise is basically known for losing close, tight games. Now we almost saw it the other night, yucking up a 21 something point lead and then hanging on to win it late. But that's what happens when you have a Harbor S, a Parcells S, a Belichick S, a Walsh S. You have one of those head coaches in that spot, you find a way to win the game.
Yeah, Q, and they're the anti-Brandon Staley staff now.
Correct.
Brandon Staley, his teams could not complete games. You talk about all those losses for the Chargers, and Harbaugh's brought that toughness. He's brought this no nonsense. He's like, look, we know who we are. We don't have a lot of stars in terms of receiver position, and we're just going to run it down your throat with our good offensive line with J.K. Dobbins. Herbert, he's taught him be efficient with the football. He's not trying for that big play home run like he did before to Williams all the time, driving the football down the field. And you know, Keenan Allen, he's protecting the football. And their defense has always had some names on it, whether it's Bosa, James, linebacking crew's pretty good. So this is a good comeback team. Now they're sitting at what, 7-3. They're right in the mix. They're obviously not going to catch the Chiefs, but I think they can make the playoffs, and they may be a little early in terms of our expectations.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's close it out as we always do. Game Ball and Lackey for week 11. Don't forget, you can catch Lloyd every Monday night, 8 to 9, with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on SR 1029 FM, The Game. And of course, Coastal Sports Network joins me on Back Your Play, and of course, The Drive with Q. Let's go with Game Ball first. I'm going to say it either was Jared Goff or Josh Allen. I just can't see any other. It's got Josh Allen's scramble on that run reminded me of Cam Newton against the Giants when they were 15-1. That scramble on third down late in the game in New York solidified, sealed his MVP. trophy that season. So I'm gonna go Josh Allen.
All right, I could switch up and say, oh, it should be Taysom Hill because he did his best Jim Thorpe impersonation and
All right.
had all those touchdowns and
Against
catches.
Cleveland, though. Come on, man.
Yeah, I know. So it's Josh Allen, man. Come on. I mean, he was just tremendous. 27 to 40, 262, had a TD. He did throw an interception, but he had 55 yards rushing. And you talk about that game closer on that fourth down play. A lot of people were getting nervous, but he shut the door, and that was a huge win for them, 30 to 21. And they're proving they're a true contender in Buffalo.
Oh, well, they covered the number. That's all I was concerned about. Lackey. I mean, can I give it to Jacksonville for not even showing up?
You and I, we're on the same page
I
today,
didn't,
my
and I
man.
didn't check. I know you post this online. I
Yep.
didn't check. I just,
I gave to Doug Peterson,
yeah, you have
emblematic
to.
of his whole team, four straight loss Q. I mean, 52-6. I mean,
Not
that
even
was just
competitive.
embarrassing. I mean, and the thing I took away from it though is there's a huge disparity between Detroit and Philadelphia. A lot of people here where I am and saying, "Oh, the Eagles are close." You saw what a dominant team Detroit is and how they dismantled that Jacksonville team. That the Eagles close it out on an interception to end the game. So this team is very dangerous. I think the road goes through Detroit and
I
NFC.
agree.
And Doug Peterson, though, he's lost 14 of the last 17. They allowed 645 yards of offense. I mean, it's just embarrassing at this point. And it's their bye week. So give him the lackey and have him move on.
You know what happens? You start to lose these close games, and then when you realize you're 2-6, 2-7, obviously Lawrence is injured, out for the rest of the season, but they lost by 3 against Green Bay. They had opportunities. They lost by 5 against Philadelphia. They had opportunities. They lost by 5 against Minnesota. They had opportunities. Now you're 2-8. Now you've dropped 3 straight, 4 or 5. And then this was the game where if you loaded up on Detroit, you're sitting back smoking a cigar and having a bourbon because you're like, this is perfect. Point being is guys are starting to make business decisions, right? So now you start to look at these first half, these second half lines, these money lines, these in-game line betting, and I look at I think the same thing is going to happen. We'll talk about it later in the week when they take on Houston. I think they're going to get smoked. They got Tennessee, the Jets, the Raiders, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. I would love for them to win at least 3 more games because I don't think the Giants are going to win 5 games. But you just see some of these teams now. What are they doing? Guys are making vacation, holiday plans. You know, where am I going to go with the wife? Where am I going to go with the mistress? Where am I going to go with the girlfriend? And they want to get out of this season pretty fast. It is
Well, we're talking
crazy.
about the number one draft pick
Yeah,
time, and it'll probably be Jacksonville.
and I think they might get a winner too. They don't need a quarterback. I guess is that's my wishful thinking, right? Because I mean, do they take a quarterback?
No, I don't think they take quarterback. I think they need to fix that offensive line and maybe bring in somebody defensively. If you bring in Travis Hunter, that
He's
he
going
can
to be a
help a
wide
variety of
receiver or he's
ways.
going to be a DB.
Ooh, that's going to be interesting, Q. I think they do put him in. If he went to Jacksonville, they put him at DB. You know what I mean? Because they already got Thomas Jr. there, who's just incredible. So,
Yeah.
but he's a great talent, and he'll probably win a Heisman. They'll find a spot for him.
Well, they ran it up the other day because again, trying to get Heisman votes. Let's call for what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is. It is what it is. All right. He of course is Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on this edition of the Drive with Q. Later on the week, BYP will start to dissect week 12 already of the NFL. We'll get into some lines, best bets, props, and predictions as well. Give Lloyd a follow at Lloyd Vance on social media, and he's always kind enough to join us. We are brought to you by Fresh Roast of Coffee. Check out the promo code and show notes BYP 20% off your first purchase. Zen Auto Concepts, the #1 detailing shop in Florida. And of course, Play It Again Sports. They give you the best bang for your buck, used sports equipment and more. All right, my friend, I always appreciate a couple moments. We'll do it later in the week with BYP.
All right, Q. Talk to you later.